Sometimes ago, in a small village, there lived a man named Okeke. From the moment he was born, it seemed like the stars had never aligned in his favor. He was poor, so poor that even the village mice scurried past his home without a second glance. His tiny mud hut was falling apart with a roof that leaked every time it rained. The villagers often mocked him, calling him Okeke the wretched, and he could do nothing but bear their cruel words in silence. Okeke tried everything to lift himself out of poverty. He worked on farms, chopped wood, and even tried his hand at fishing. But no matter what he did, he could only earn enough to buy a small loaf of bread or a few yam to fuel his empty stomach. While his friends built strong houses and married beautiful wives, Okeke remained alone, unable to find a woman willing to share his life of hardship. At the age of 40, Okeke's despair grew deeper. He felt like a failure, especially when he saw his friends with their wives and children living comfortably and laughing together. Every night, he would sit outside his crumbly home, staring at the stars, wondering why life had been so unkind to him. He prayed for a miracle, for something, anything that would change his miserable existence. But the days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months, and nothing changed. His friends, though aware of his struggles, weren't much help either. Whenever he asked them for money to start a small business, they would laugh and say, "Okay, even if we give you money, you would probably lose it. Come, let's go to the beer parlor instead." And so, they would take him to the local beer parlor, where they would buy him drinks and food, making sure he was too drunk to ask for money again. Okeke knew they weren't true friends, but he had no one else. Yet, he never gave up hope. Every day, he would wake up and tell himself that tomorrow would be better, that somehow his luck would change. But deep down, he felt a growing emptiness, a sense that time was running out. He feared he would die poor and forgotten, just another man who had failed to leave a mark on the world. Then came the day that changed everything. It started like any other, with Okeke wandering through the village in search of work. But as he passed by a group of young women, he heard one of them shout, "Look, it's Okeke the wretched, still poor and useless. I see. Maybe you should just disappear. Save yourself the shame." The others laughed loudly, and Okeke felt the sting of their words deep in his heart. For years, he had endured the mockery of others, but this time, something inside him snapped. He could feel the heat rising to his face. His fist clenched and his chest tightened. He was done being the village laughingstock. That day, he swore to himself that he would change his life, no matter what it took, even if it meant taking a path he had never considered before. And so, with a heavy heart and a mind full of dark thoughts, Okeke made his way to the outskirts of the village where the old traditional priest lived. This priest was known for his strange powers and the eerie rituals he performed. People whispered that he could make the poorest man rich overnight, but at a terrible cost. Okeke had always feared such things, but now fear was a luxury he could no longer afford. As he approached the priest's home, Okeke felt a chill run down his spine. The small, thatched house was surrounded by strange symbols and the skulls of animals. Smoke billowed from a fire pit, and the air smelled of burning herbs. Okeke hesitated at the entrance, wondering if he was making a terrible mistake. But then, he thought of the laughter, the mocking words, and the emptiness in his life. With a deep breath, he stepped forward. The old priest looked up from his fire as Okeke entered. His eyes were sharp and piercing, and his voice was as cold as the wind that blew through the trees. What brings you here, Okeke? He asked, though it seemed he already knew the answer. I, I need your help, Okeke stammered. I can't go on like this. I'm willing to do anything to change my fate. The priest studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Anything, you say? Very well, but be warned, what you seek comes at a price that may be too high for you to bear. Okeke's heart pounded in his chest, but he stood firm. I'm ready, he said, though the words felt like stones in his mouth. Little did he know that the path he was about to take would lead him into a world of darkness, deception, and unimaginable horror. As Okeke stood before the traditional priest, he couldn't help but feel the weight of his decision. The priest stared intently at Okeke with eyes that seemed to see straight through him. You say you are ready to do anything, the priest began, his voice low and measured. But be sure, Okeke, for once you start down this path, there is no turning back. Okeke nodded, his throat dry. I understand, Papa. I have nothing left to lose. The priest began to chant in a language Okeke didn't understand, his voice rising and falling in an haunting melody. Okeke could feel a strange energy in the air, a tingly sensation that made the hair on the back of his neck stand on end. After what felt like an eternity, the priest stood chanting and turned to face Okeke. His eyes were darker than before, almost as if the fire had drained the light from them. There are many ways to wealth, Okeke, he said, but all of them require sacrifice. The priest paused, letting the words sink in before continuing. The first option is the most powerful, but also the most painful. You must sacrifice someone close to you, someone whose blood runs in your veins. Your mother, your sister, the choice is yours. Okeke recoiled at the thought. He had come here desperate for change, but the idea of his own mother or sister was too much to bear. No, I can't do that, he said, shaking his head. I can't kill my family. The priest nodded slowly, as if he had expected this response. Very well. The second option is less drastic, but still costly. You can offer up your manhood, your ability to father children. In exchange, you will receive wealth beyond your wildest dreams, but you will never have a family of your own. Okeke hesitated. He had always dreamed of having a wife and children, of building a family he could be proud of, but the thought of living the rest of his life in poverty, alone and forgotten, was unbearable. He weighed his options carefully, but in the end, he shook his head once more. No, I can't give that up either. There must be another way. Papa, please help me. The priest's eyes narrowed, and for a moment, Okeke thought he saw a flicker of something sinister in the old man's gaze. There is one final option, the priest said slowly. It is a ritual that will grant you wealth and success, but it comes with a price. You will be given a special ring that will attract blessings and fortune to you, but in return, you must perform a daily act that most would find repulsive. What kind of act? Okeke asked cautiously. The priest stepped closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. You must eat your own poop every day. No day must pass without you consuming it, or the consequences will be dire. Okeke stared at the priest in disbelief. Eat his own feces? The very thought made his stomach turn. But then, he remembered the years of suffering, the endless days of hunger and humiliation. If this was the price he had to pay for wealth, could he really refuse? Is there no other way? Okeke asked, his voice trembling. The priest shook his head. No other way that will give you what you seek. But heed my warning, Okeke. This ritual is not to be taken lightly. If you fail to perform it even once, everything you have gained will be lost, and your punishment will be severe. Okeke was silent for a long time, his mind racing. He thought of his life, of all the times he had been mocked and ridiculed. He thought of the wealth he had dreamed of, the life he could have if he agreed to this strange ritual. Finally, with a deep breath, he nodded. I will do it. I'll perform the ritual. The priest smiled, a cold, thin smile that sent a shiver down Okeke's spine. Very well, he said. The ritual will begin tonight. That evening, Okeke performed the ritual as instructed. The priest chanted and sprinkled powders over a fire, and then handed Okeke a small wooden box. Inside was a simple gold ring, unadorned and plain. This ring will be your key to wealth, the priest explained. Wear it always and never remove it. But remember, no matter what happens, you must fulfill the ritual every day. With a heavy heart, Okeke left the priest's home and returned to his village. That night, as he sat alone in his hut, he contemplated what he had agreed to. The thought of what he had to do the next day made his skin crawl, but he pushed the thought aside. He had made his choice, and there was no turning back. The next morning, Okeke awoke with a mixture of dread and anticipation. He knew what he had to do, and though every fiber of his being rebelled against it, he forced himself to follow through. As he swallowed the bitter, foul-tasting substance, he felt a wave of nausea wash over him. At the same time, he felt something else, a strange sensation, almost like a surge of energy coursing through his veins. From that day on, Okeke's life began to change. At first, it was small things. People in the village started treating him with more respect, offering him work and even small gifts. But as the days went by, the changes became more dramatic. He found money where he had none before. Opportunities seemed to fall into his lap, and his fortune began to rise. Before long, Okeke had saved enough to leave the village and start a new life in the city. There, his luck only continued to grow. He started a business, and within months, he was making more money than he had ever dreamed possible. He bought a grand house, wore fine clothes, and dined at the best restaurants. People admired him, envied him, and sought his favor. But every night, no matter how wealthy or successful he became, Okeke would return home and perform the ritual. It became a part of his routine, a dark secret that he kept hidden from the world. And as long as he followed the rules, his wealth continued to grow. As Okeke's wealth grew, so did his reputation in the village and the city. People began to talk about him, how a man who had once been so poor could now afford such luxury. His life had transformed in ways that even he could hardly believe. He purchased several houses in the most affluent parts of town, built houses in the village, drove the finest cars, and dressed in the latest fashions. But no matter how far he rose, Okeke never forgot the strange and dark ritual that had brought him his fortune. Every morning, after indulging in a lavish breakfast, Okeke would lock himself in the bathroom to perform the ritual. He had to eat his poop no matter how wealthy he became. It was a disgusting and humiliating task, but Okeke reminded himself that it was the price he had to pay for the life he now enjoyed. He followed the rules with unwavering discipline, never missing a day, for he knew the consequences of failing to do so. At first, it was hard. Okeke would gag and feel his stomach turn as he forced himself to complete the ritual. But with time, he became numb to the revulsion. He began to see it as just another part of his daily routine, like brushing his teeth or taking a shower. As long as he did what was required, the money kept flowing in, and that was all that mattered. Soon, Okeke's business ventures expanded. He ventured into importation, traveling to far-off lands like China to bring in goods that would sell for high prices in the city. He became known as a shrewd businessman, able to strike deals that left his competitors in the dust. His name was mentioned with respect, and people sought his advice on financial matters. Even the wealthiest men in the city began to court his favor, eager to partner with him. But despite all the outward success, Okeke was haunted by a deep sense of unease. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was living on borrowed time, that his wealth was built on a fragile foundation that could crumble at any moment. Every day, as he performed the ritual, he felt a gnawing fear in the pit of his stomach. What if something went wrong? What if one day he couldn't fulfill the requirements? This fear kept him vigilant. He made sure to eat plenty of food throughout the day, ensuring that his body would produce what he needed for the ritual. He took care of his health, avoided anything that might upset his digestive system, and even consulted doctors when he felt the slightest bit unwell. To the outside world, it was a picture of success, but only Okeke knew the true cost of his fortune. One day, while attending a grand party hosted by one of the city elites, Okeke met a woman named Ada. She was beautiful, with smooth dark skin, bright eyes, and a smile that could light up a room. Ada was intelligent and charming, and she seemed genuinely interested in Okeke. She had heard of his success and was eager to learn more about him. Okeke also was smitten by her. Ada was different from the women he had known in the village. She was confident and sophisticated, and she carried herself with a grace that left Okeke in awe. They talked for hours that night, and by the end of the evening, Okeke knew that he wanted Ada to be a part of his life. Over the next few months, Okeke and Ada grew closer. They went out to the finest restaurants, attended the most exclusive events, and traveled together to exotic destinations. Ada admired Okeke's wealth and success, and Okeke enjoyed the company of a woman who could match him in wit and conversation. Eventually, Okeke proposed to Ada, and she accepted with joy. They were married in a lavish ceremony that was the talk of the town, and Ada moved into Okeke's grand mansion. At first, life with Ada was everything Okeke had hoped for. She was a loving wife, always attentive and supportive. She seemed genuinely happy to be with him, and Okeke felt that, finally, he had everything he had ever wanted: a beautiful home, a thriving business, and a wife who adored him. But as time passed, Ada began to notice things about her husband that troubled her. For one, Okeke ate far more than she had expected. She had always heard that wealthy men were usually conservative with their meals, eating small portions of refined dishes. But Okeke was different. He had a voracious appetite. He would pile his plate high at every meal, devouring everything in sight. Ada found it odd, but chalked it up to his personal preference. Perhaps, she thought, he was simply a man who enjoyed his food. What concerned her more, however, was how much time Okeke spent in the bathroom. Every morning, without fail, he would disappear for 20 to 30 minutes, sometimes longer. Ada began to wonder what he was doing in there. She asked him once jokingly why he took so long, and Okeke shrugged it off, saying that he often struggled with constipation and needed time to relieve himself. But Ada wasn't entirely convinced. She had grown up hearing stories about wealthy men who had strange habits or engaged in bizarre rituals to maintain their success. Could it be that her husband was one of them? The thought gnawed at her, but she pushed it aside. After all, Okeke was a good man and he treated her well. Surely there was nothing more to it than what he had said. Yet, as the days went by, Ada's curiosity grew. She began to pay closer attention to Okeke's routine, watching for any signs that might explain his strange behavior. She noticed how he would eat than usual on certain days, as if he was preparing himself for something. She also noticed that he seemed tensed and distracted whenever he went into the bathroom, as if he was dreading what he had to do. The more Ada observed, the more uneasy she became. But despite her suspicions, she couldn't bring herself to confront Okeke directly. She loved him, and she didn't want to jeopardize their marriage over what might be nothing more than her imagination. So, she kept her worries to herself, hoping that they would eventually fade away. But deep down, Ada knew that something wasn't right, and soon her curiosity would lead her to uncover the dark secret that Okeke had been hiding all along. Her unease turned into a quiet obsession. She began to listen at the bathroom door, trying to understand what he was doing inside. She heard strange noises, sometimes the sound of chewing, sometimes faint grunts. Yet, she couldn't pinpoint what it all meant. She watched him closely, trying to put the pieces together, but Okeke remained secretive. Then, one day, something happened that neither of them could have predicted. It started like any other day. Okeke woke up early, had his usual large breakfast, and prepared to perform the ritual. But when he entered the bathroom, something felt off. He waited for the usual urge to come, but it didn't. Panic set in as he realized he was constipated. He knew what this meant. If he didn't fulfill the ritual by midnight, everything he had gained would be lost. Okeke tried everything. He ate more food and fibers, drank water, and even took some medication to help him relieve himself. But nothing worked. His anxiety grew as the clock ticked closer to midnight. It was 9:30 p.m. and still he hadn't succeeded. He could feel the minutes slipping away, and with them his fortune. Ada, who had noticed her husband's restlessness throughout the evening, was concerned. She watched as he paced around the house, drinking water and sweating profusely despite the cool air from the air conditioner. She had never seen him like this before. Her instinct told her something was terribly wrong. "Babe, are you okay? You've been acting strange all night," she said, her voice full of concern. But Okeke was too consumed by his fear to respond. He didn't have time for explanations. He needed to make the ritual work. Desperate, Okeke called the traditional priest who had given him the ritual in the first place. His hands trembled as he held the phone, his voice shaking as he explained the situation. "You must find a way, Okeke," the priest warned, his tone grave. "If you fail to complete the ritual tonight, you will lose everything. The spirit do not tolerate failure." With just minutes to spare, Okeke looked himself in the bathroom and prayed for a miracle. He tried again and again, but the relief he sought wouldn't come. The pressure was unbearable, both physically and mentally. He was sweating, his heart pounding in his chest as he watched his wristwatch tick. 11:58 p.m., just 2 minutes left. Okeke was on the verge of breaking down when at last his body responded. In those final minutes, he managed to defecate. Without hesitation, he performed the ritual, swallowing the foul substance with a desperation he had never felt before. For the first time, he ate it as though it were a feast, savoring each bite in the hope that it would save him from ruin. Ada, who had been standing near the bathroom door, heard the strange noises coming from inside. She had heard him chew before, but this time it was different. The sounds were louder, more deliberate, as though Okeke was enjoying whatever he was consuming. Unable to contain her curiosity any longer, She leaned closer to the door, wondering what could possibly be happening. The next day, life seemed to return to normal, but Ada's curiosity grew stronger. She began to monitor Okeke more closely, paying attention to his every move. She continued to listen outside the bathroom, but despite her efforts, she couldn't figure out what was going on. The tension between them grew, but she remained silent, waiting for the right moment to uncover the truth. Then, one day, the moment came. Okeke was in the bathroom, performing the ritual as usual when his phone began to ring in the living room. At first, Ada ignored, assuming Okeke would return the call later. But the phone rang persistently over and over until it had registered 10 missed calls. Concerned that it might be an important business call, Ada decided to take the phone to him. She knocked on the bathroom door, but there was no response. The phone continued to ring in her hand, and Ada felt a growing sense of urgency. Without thinking, she pushed the door open, expecting to find Okeke washing his hands or adjusting his clothes. Instead, she found him crouched on the floor, eating his own feces. Ada's scream echoed through the house. The sight before her was too horrifying to comprehend. Okeke, the man she had married, the wealthy and successful man she admired, was engaged in something so vile, so unimaginable that she could hardly believe her eyes. Okeke, who had thought the door was locked, froze in place. His worst nightmare had come true. Ada had seen him. The ritual had been broken. The priest's warning came rushing back to him, and he knew there would be no escape from the consequences. His heart pounded as fear and shame consumed him. Ada backed away, trembling, unable to speak. She dropped the phone and ran from the bathroom, tears streaming down her face. How could this be happening? What had she just witnessed? But for Okeke, the consequences were immediate. A sharp pain shot through his head, blurring his vision and sending him to the floor. His mind began to unravel, reality slipping away as he descended into madness. The darkness he had tried to avoid for so long had finally claimed him. As Okeke's screams filled the house, Ada realized the terrible truth. Her husband's wealth had come at a price too high to bear. Ada stood frozen in the hallway, her mind racing to process the horrifying scene she had just witnessed. The man she had loved and trusted, the man she believed was simply a hard-working and successful businessman, had been reduced to something unrecognizable. Her heart pounded in her chest as she tried to make sense of it all. Was this some kind of twisted nightmare? But the reality of what she had seen was undeniable. Inside the bathroom, Okeke's world was collapsing. The room spun around him as the darkness he had feared for so long finally took hold. The priest's warning echoed in his mind. If anyone ever sees you, the consequences will be dire. And now, as the madness tightened its grip on his mind, Okeke knew that everything he had gained was slipping away and there was nothing he could do to stop it. He staggered to his feet, his thoughts a chaotic jumble of fear, shame, and confusion. The walls of the bathroom seemed to close in on him, and he could feel his sanity unraveling like a frayed thread. His hands shook uncontrollably as he gripped the edge of the sink, trying to steady himself, but it was no use. The darkness was too strong and it consumed him completely. In the living room, Ada could hear Okeke scream, deep cries that sent chills down her spine. She wanted to run, to escape the madness that had overtaken their home, but her legs felt too rooted to the spot. Part of her wanted to go back to the bathroom to try and help her husband, but the memory of what she had seen held her back. How could she possibly help him when she could barely face the truth herself? After what felt like an eternity, the screams subsided. replaced by an eerie silence that hung in the air like a heavy fog. Ada cautiously made her way back to the bathroom, her heart pounding with each step. The door was still ajar, and she pushed it open slowly, dreading what she might find. Inside, Okeke was slumped on the floor, his once proud figure now reduced to a crumbled heap. His eyes, once full of ambition and determination, were now wide and vacant, staring blankly at the ceiling. He muttered incoherently, his mind lost in a maze of madness. The man who had once commanded respect and admiration was now a shell of his former self, broken by the very ritual that had brought him his wealth. Ada fell to her knees beside him, tears streaming down her face. "Okeke, why?" she whispered, her voice trembling with a mixture of sorrow and disbelief. But Okeke didn't respond. He was too far gone, trapped in a world of torment that she could never reach. As the reality of the situation sank in, Ada knew that their lives would never be the same. The wealth, the happiness they had once shared, it was all tainted by the dark secret that had brought them to this point. She couldn't stay in the house any longer. She needed to get away from the madness, from the memories of what she had seen. Without looking back, Ada fled the house, leaving Okeke behind in its shattered state. She ran through the streets, her mind a whirlwind of emotions: fear, anger, sadness, and a deep sense of betrayal. How could the man she had loved and trusted have fallen so far? How could she ever have been so blind to the truth? In the days that followed, word spread throughout the city of Okeke's downfall. People whispered about the once wealthy man who had gone mad, his fortune evaporating as quickly as it had appeared. Some said it was the result of dark magic, while others believed it was simply the price he had paid for his greed. But no one knew the full truth except Ada, who carried the weight of that secret with her wherever she went. As for Okeke, he wandered the streets in a daze, a broken man who had lost everything. His mind was a jumble of fragmented thoughts, his once sharp intellect dulled by the madness that had consumed him. The wealth, the power, the respect, it had all been stripped away, leaving him with nothing but the bitter memory of the life he had once known. And so, the story of Okeke became a cautionary tale whispered in hushed tones among the people of the city, a story of a man who had sought wealth at any cost, only to lose everything in the end. A man who had eaten his own feces to stay alive and wealthy, but who had ultimately paid the ultimate price for his greed. Kindly like this video and subscribe for more interesting stories. See you in the next one. Goodbye.